Hello, my name's Merrick Dolen, and I'm 78 years old. 2 weeks ago, I gave away the house I built with my bare hands, the one meant to carry my family's name, because my own son tried to take it behind my back. He called it equity. His fiancée called it ceremonial. But I heard them planning to declare me incompetent, sell the walls where my wife died, and silence me at their wedding like I was just some old stain on the guest list. Now I live alone, in a rented apartment above a hardware store. No lake, no garden, just a folder labeled, "To Delaney, one day." What would you do if your legacy became someone else's leverage? The phone rang just after 4. I was standing in the kitchen, hands wet from rinsing a chipped coffee mug, when I saw Kellen's name flash on the screen. My first thought wasn't joy, it was calculation. We hadn't spoken on the phone in nearly 3 months, and before that, only brief check-ins when Delaney prompted him. The sudden warmth in his voice when I answered felt out of place, like an old suit pulled from the back of the closet and worn just for show. "Dad, hey," he said, dragging out the syllables. "I was thinking, how about dinner? Tomorrow night. You, me, and Maris at our place." His tone was too polished, too polite. Something about the cadence told me it wasn't his idea. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, letting the silence stretch just a little before answering. "Dinner. Sure. What's the occasion?" He chuckled lightly. "No occasion. Just thought it's time. You haven't seen the townhouse since we finished the kitchen." That part, I believed. Maris had a thing about staging. She once rearranged a bookshelf at a neighbor's barbecue because the spines weren't aligned emotionally. I said yes, of course. But I wrote the time and address on a post-it, like I'd scribbled down coordinates. The next evening, I parked outside their unit in the new development by the lake homes too close together, all painted in the same shade of optimism. Maris opened the door before I could knock. Her smile was a realtor's smile, practiced and luminous but hollow behind the eyes. "You look well, Merrick," she said, gesturing for me to come inside. I stepped in, boots scuffing their polished floor, and took in the scene, a strategically placed orchid, matching silver frames on the wall. Every surface gleamed, but none of it felt lived in. It was like walking into a catalog. She offered me sparkling water and launched into a tour before I could sit. "This is the new dining set from West Elm. Kellen picked it, didn't you?" "Honey," she called into the kitchen, where my son was decanting wine like it was part of a ritual. He looked up, smiled in that thin way he did when he wasn't sure what to say. We sat down eventually. The plates were white, the food carefully portioned, roasted salmon with some sort of green puree. Conversation flowed, if you could call it that. Kellen asked about my back and whether I'd renewed the termite inspection. Maris nodded supportively at every financial reference. Then came the phrase, casual and soft-spoken, nestled between sips of Chardonnay. "You've got a lot of space in that old place, Dad. Have you thought about maybe downsizing?" I didn't answer right away. My fork hovered over the plate. He smiled, easing into it. "I mean, it's a beautiful home, but maintaining it can't be easy. You know, it might even make a nice wedding gift." Maris interjected. Her tone was feather-light, but her eyes didn't blink. There it was. I chewed slowly, keeping my expression neutral. Didn't realize property came in gift wrap. Maris laughed too quickly, like she hadn't expected me to speak. Kellen reached for the wine again. After dinner, they insisted I take a look around. "We've been dreaming about what we'd do with a place like yours," Maris said as we walked toward the entryway. She gestured, fingers slicing the air. "Tear down the wall between the kitchen and den. Open it all up. Natural light is everything these days. She paused at a framed photo on their console, a vacation shot of the two of them in Costa Rica. Her hand, I noticed, rested on the chair I had just vacated, fingers drumming lightly on the armrest like she already owned it. I didn't say much. I nodded, offered polite interest, even complimented their taste, but on the drive home, the silence in my truck was deafening. The road blurred as I retraced every word from that dinner. Not once had they asked how I was sleeping, how I managed the garden this spring, whether I'd been lonely. It wasn't a dinner invitation. It was an audition. When I got home, I didn't turn on the lights, just walked straight to the mantel, where Marjorie's photo still stood. She was smiling in that picture, one hand on my shoulder, the other clutching her sun hat like the wind might take it. Tonight, that smile seemed sharper, less serene, more warning. I stood there for a while, then moved into the kitchen, opened the drawer next to the stove. Inside was the small silver key to the lockbox under the bed where I kept the deed, our old will, a letter I never mailed. I took the key out, held it in my palm, but I didn't move. Not yet. I didn't send the RSVP card back. I pinned it to the fridge instead, a quiet reminder that even silence could carry weight. The next morning, the phone buzzed around 9:30. Kellen again. This time, he didn't sound rehearsed. He sounded rushed. "I'm swinging by," he said. "Need a quick favor." 20 minutes later, he stood at my door, folder in hand, smile too wide for a Monday. No coffee, no preamble. He stepped in like he still lived there, set the folder on the counter, and slid it toward me with a gentle nudge. "Just some ideas," he said, like he was offering paint swatches. Inside were two things: a photocopy of my property deed and a draft of something titled Joint Legacy Transfer, Preliminary. My name was misspelled once, scratched out and corrected in pen. No signatures, just margins filled with annotations in Maris's looping cursive. I closed the folder and looked at him. 2 weeks to go. "Is this what's keeping you up at night?" He chuckled. "It's not urgent. Just something to think about. With the wedding coming, we're reevaluating everything, consolidating." He used that word like it meant love. 2 days later, Maris texted venue preview Friday at noon. "Would mean a lot if you came." I arrived early, mostly to steady my footing before the show began. The lobby was all mirrors and white roses, with a faint scent of citrus candles trailing in the air. Staff bustled past with headsets and clipboards. When I gave my name, the young man at the front desk blinked, scanned a list, and said, "Oh, your uncle from the groom's side." Right, I didn't correct him. Inside the reception hall, my name tag rested on a white cloth napkin placed at a corner table beside a sign that read "Overflow." I stood there a moment, hand hovering over the chair. "Hey, we'll fix that," Kellen said. Coming up behind me, he didn't move the tag. As we walked the venue, a slideshow played on loop across a mounted screen. Photos of Kellen and Maris hiking in Zion, sipping cocktails on rooftops, posing with Maris's family on holidays I wasn't invited to. There were baby pictures of Maris, high school portraits of Maris, not one of our lake house, not one of Marjorie, not one of me. I excused myself and stepped into the hallway where the wedding planner, a thin woman with a headset and clipboard, was coordinating table linens. She gave me a tight smile. "You're Merrick?" she asked. "Maris mentioned you might want to chat." We moved to a quieter corner. She flipped through her notes, not meeting my eyes. "She's aiming for a streamlined visual," she said. "Minimalist. Cohesive. Cohesive," I repeated. "There was some concern," she added, "about family dynamics disrupting the aesthetic." I almost laughed. not because it was funny, but because someone thought you could curate family like wallpaper samples. I didn't argue, didn't raise my voice, just nodded, thanked her, and stepped back into the room like nothing had happened. We finished the tour. Kellen talked about caterers and color schemes. I listened, hands in my pockets, cataloging every bruise they thought I couldn't feel. On the ride back, the silence felt different than usual. Kellen filled it with wedding logistics, transport schedules, guest lodging, rehearsal plans. I didn't say much. Let the hum of the engine carry my thoughts. That night, back at the house, a packet of mail sat waiting, mostly bills and circulars, and the RSVP confirmations. My envelope had been returned, included with the rest standard white card, names printed in cursive, except mine read M. Dolen. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I reached for a pen, drew a circle around the name, and through the center of that neat little loop, I made an X bold, final, silent. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at the dining table with the RSVP card still pinned to the fridge, the X I'd drawn on it staring back like a verdict. I made tea around midnight chamomile, a habit Marjorie had sworn by. The house was quiet, the kind of stillness that felt like it was waiting for something. Somewhere near the guest room, I heard voices. At first, I thought it was the TV left on, but it had that layered hush, real people trying not to be heard. I moved silently, my bare feet careful on the floorboards, until I reached the hallway. The window near the guest room was slightly open. Outside, near the patio steps, 3 silhouettes stood close: Kellen, Maris, and someone else, Rowena. It wouldn't be permanent, Maris was saying, her voice tight but composed. It's just a tool, legally. You said you'd check viability. Rowena sighed. I said I'd look into the medical necessity. Declaring someone incapacitated isn't casual. It requires evidence. We have the neighbor, Kellen chimed in. Dr. Ennis. He's always said Dad's memory slips sometimes. A few forms, some gentle guidance. It's better to do this now than wait for something public and messy. The words sat there in the air like wet cement. I pressed my back to the wall. My throat stayed dry. My face, still. Maris lowered her voice, but I caught enough. The transition would secure the house. It keeps things clean for the wedding, avoids probate later. Honestly, it's kind. They spoke about me like I was already a burden, something to process and minimize. I turned from the window and made my way back through the hallway, careful not to let the floor creak. My hand brushed the edge of a picture frame, Marjorie and I at the lake, summer of '87. Her smile then had been real. I grabbed my coat from the hook near the back door. The air outside was crisp, lake wind slicing under the collar. I didn't know where I was walking, only that I needed distance between me and that conversation. Down the trail. The moonlight hit the water like broken glass. I stood near the old boathouse, hands in my pockets, thoughts louder than the waves. For the first time, I admitted what I hadn't let myself say. They weren't just greedy. They were prepared. I looked toward the trees lining the property, every fence post I'd replaced, every repair done after a storm. I built this home with hands that knew each nail. They thought legacy meant real estate, but legacy has muscle memory. Mine remembered every inch. When I got home, I walked straight into the bedroom and pulled the key from the drawer. The lockbox slid out from under the bed with a familiar scrape. Inside, the folded flag from my service, Marjorie's pressed handkerchief, a black and white photo of us in Germany, and an envelope marked, "Read when you can't ask me." My fingers trembled. I unfolded the letter. Her handwriting hadn't changed since the first note she'd left in my duffel bag in '65, loopy, bold, honest. "Don't let them take what we built," she wrote. "They don't know the weight of each brick like you do. If you're reading this, I'm gone. But you're not alone. You never were." I read it twice, then again. Then I placed the letter beside the deed, slid both into the fireproof sleeve. "You trusted me," I said out loud, voice steady, "to finish what we started. And I would. Not with shouting or threats, but with precision." I sat at the desk, pulled out a yellow notepad. The pen in my hand felt heavier than it should. I wrote 2 names. One was a lawyer. The other, a man I once pulled from gunfire in Panama. The email from Cassian had come through while I was boiling water for my morning tea. One line. No fluff. "I'm free tomorrow at 10. Bring everything." I stared at those words for a long moment before shutting the kettle off. The steam hissed like an insult I'd forgotten to answer. That morning, light in Coeur d'Alene, filtered through the lace curtains Marjorie had sewn years ago, looked too soft for what the day was about to bring. 8 days left before the wedding, and here I was rewriting not just my will, but the story I thought my family would tell about me when I was gone. Maris had smiled wide yesterday, like someone selling sunshine. "The groom's speech will stand in for family remarks," she'd said, as if I were a placeholder. My name, apparently, didn't even warrant a seat on the screen where they'd flash special thanks. The planner had nodded, awkwardly polite. No chart for parent seating, no toast from the father of the groom, just a video, produced and pre-cut. I hadn't made the edit. I should have seen it coming, but I didn't. Or maybe I did, and refused to believe the knife was already mid-air. That night, I opened the velvet box tucked in the back of my dresser drawer, the pocket watch, silver-plated, heavy in the palm, still ticking after all these years. My father had worn it through his final years at the mill. He'd handed it to me without ceremony. "You'll know when to pass it on." Well, hell, Dad. I thought this was the time. I texted Kellen just before midnight. "Can we meet man-to-man tomorrow? Before rehearsal? Just us." His reply came 10 minutes later. "Sure, Dad. Lobby at 7 is good." The next evening, I arrived 10 minutes early. The rehearsal space lobby had those over-designed chandeliers, glass that tried too hard to be elegant. Kellen and Maris showed up together, him in a navy shirt he hadn't ironed, her in a cream pantsuit that probably cost more than my first car. I stood, cleared my throat, and offered Kellen the box. He opened it halfway, before Maris snatched it and popped it open like a prop. "Is this antique or ironic?" she said, her laugh sharp as ice cubes in a glass of gin. Kellen looked inside, blinked twice. "Thanks, Dad," he said, voice flat. "We'll keep it as a keepsake." Keepsake. That word sat in my chest like gravel. A thing put away, archived, no longer used but too sentimental to toss. I nodded, said nothing, not a word. There's a kind of anger that doesn't boil, it just freezes. Quiet, stony, outside. The night air smelled like pine and burnt sugar from the food truck down the street. I didn't light a cigarette. Haven't touched one in 20 years, though I still miss the first inhale. Instead, I dialed Cassian. He picked up after 2 rings. No greeting. "I need to make some changes to my will," I said. He didn't ask questions, just murmured, "Understood. Bring everything." I walked home slowly. The streets were half lit and empty. My legs ached more than usual, but I didn't mind. At least I could feel something. Back in the house, I poured myself 2 fingers of rye and sat on the couch, turned on the TV but left the volume low, just background. Then I remembered the old tapes. I dug through the bin under the stairs and found the labeled one, Marjorie's 70th, backyard. I dusted off the VCR and hoped the tape still worked. There he was, a younger Kellen, 10 years old maybe, hair too long, smile too wide. He held the watch up for the camera and said proudly, "One day, it'll be mine." Marjorie had laughed off camera. "Only if you earn it, sweetheart." That version of him, innocent, sincere, wide-eyed, felt like a stranger now, like an old friend who moved away and forgot to write. I rewound the tape, played it again. "One day it'll be mine." I closed the player, turned off the lamp, and in the dark, I opened my email. Subject line: estate, urgent. Let's talk before the rehearsal. Then I hit send. I didn't call her back. Not right away. I needed to know, was this regret? Or just another tactic? The voicemail from Rowena sat untouched on my phone as I stood on the porch that next morning, coffee cooling in my hand. The RSVP card was still taped to the fridge. I hadn't touched it since the day it came in. Thick cream cardstock, that absurd gold trim. "This wedding will bring everyone together," Maris had said over dinner, her hand grazing my arm like she was offering absolution. "It's going to heal things. Heal things." I scoffed under my breath. It doesn't start with cutting someone's name off a video. Inside. The silence in the kitchen was thicker than the morning fog outside. I'd always imagined my home would be loud before Kellen's wedding laughter, chaos, maybe someone burning a pan of eggs. Not this hollow waiting, as if something had already left. But no one said goodbye. I needed to get out. The leash was still looped by the door. I grabbed it, not for a dog, but because I knew if I walked near the park at this hour, Delaney might be there. She walked her little mutt most mornings before work. I didn't want to ambush her, but I wouldn't mind. Proximity. I found her near the rose arbor bench, the one I used to sit with Kellen when he was small, back when he still asked me questions about trees and clouds. She was crouched by her dog, adjusting its collar. "Hey, Granddad," she said, bright but cautious. I nodded, hands in my pockets. "Nice morning." She patted the bench beside her, and we sat. The dog settled at her feet, and, for a minute, we watched joggers pass, couples arguing quietly over coffee lids, a kid chasing bubbles with sticky fingers. I heard, "Stuff's been weird," she said, not looking at me. "Yep," I replied. She took a breath. "After the wedding? Are you still going to live here?" I didn't answer right away. "And I mean," she continued, trying to steady her voice, "will we still be a family?" That one sat heavier than any silence I'd known. She wasn't asking about geography. She was asking if we still shared a name, a bond, a line drawn in blood instead of choice. I looked down at my hands, liver spotted, scarred from decades of work. Once, those hands had held her as an infant, small enough to fit in one palm. "I don't know," I said quietly. "I honestly don't know." She blinked quickly, nodding, then wiped her cheek with her sleeve and gave a tight smile. "I better get to work." Delaney, but she was already walking, the dog in tow, her shoulders tight. I wandered to the local coffee shop, more out of routine than craving. Used to be they knew my order when I walked in. Today, the room quieted like I'd brought a cold draft with me. "Hi, Mr. Dolen," the barista mumbled, her eyes flitted to the side. "Hope everything's okay. I heard some stuff." "What kind of stuff?" She hesitated. "That you weren't invited to give a toast. That there's tension. I just hope it's not true." I gave her a half nod and paid cash. Back outside, the bitterness in the cup matched the taste in my mouth. So this is how it spreads whispers before facts. I was becoming the story, not the source. I returned home and pulled out the estate folder Cassian helped me start years ago. A navy binder with tabs: property, healthcare proxy, trusts. I opened to the section labeled discretionary powers and slid in a note, written in red ink. Any attempt to declare me incapacitated voids all inheritance rights. I capped the pen and stared at the page. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. On a whim. I walked to the bookshelf and picked up the photo of Kellen and Delaney at age 10 and 5. 4th of July, popsicles in hand, fireworks reflecting in their eyes. I placed it face down. It made a soft sound, just wood and glass on a shelf, but to me it echoed, like pulling the plug on an old lamp you forgot was even lit. That night, after dinner and the dishes, after I'd checked the porch light and locked up, the voicemail still waited. I pressed play. Rowena's voice was steady, maybe too calm. I need to talk to you before rehearsal. Alone. I stared at the phone for a long time, then set it down. I didn't go to bed that night. I stayed up reading every clause I once thought I'd never need to use. The next morning, after a cold shower and 2 cups of coffee that tasted like regret, I met Rowena at a quiet cafe tucked behind the library. She had picked it, I suspected, because no one we knew would be there. Smart. Quiet. She arrived 10 minutes late, eyes already brimming with something halfway between apology and exhaustion. She didn't order anything, just sat down across from me, like someone sitting at the edge of a hospital bed. "This is spiraling," she said softly. "I thought it'd be easier, but it's not." I didn't interrupt. I let the silence do the talking. She leaned forward, palms flat on the table. "Merrick, can we find a way to compromise for the sake of appearances? At least until the wedding's over." I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out the RSVP card, and set it face down between us. She looked at it like it had teeth. "I see," she whispered. "So that's where we are." That evening, just as the sky turned that stubborn lavender shade over the lake, a text came in from Kellen. "Join us tonight for final prep." The tone was breezy, like he was inviting me to fold napkins. When I pulled up outside the townhouse, I expected a family huddle, maybe Maris in yoga pants, a to-do list on the counter. Instead, I walked into a room where everyone was dressed like they were about to close a mortgage. Maris's parents stood near the fireplace, glasses of white wine in hand. A man in a navy suit I didn't recognize sat at the table with a leather portfolio. Kellen waved me in with a grin too polished to be casual. "Glad you could make it," he said, like I'd been summoned. I sat down without greeting anyone. Kellen slid a folder across the table. "We've drafted a simple title transfer. It keeps the house in the family and allows us to access equity for future investments. It's structured to protect your interests." Maris chimed in, syrupy as ever. "It's really ceremonial. Merrick, you're still the soul of the place." I opened the folder, clean lines, legal language in a font I used to understand but now looked like static. I looked up at them, the whole room. "I was the soul," I said slowly. "Now I'm apparently just the signature." A pause. Then Kellen leaned in, folding his hands like a man offering wisdom. "If you don't sign tonight, Dad, maybe it's better you don't come to the wedding." It wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. That's what made it worse. Maris's father shifted, clearly uneasy. "Let's take a breath here." But I was already standing. I didn't speak. I didn't slam the folder or knock over a chair like in those dramas. I just walked out. The air outside hit like truth cold, biting, unforgiving. Stellan Reeves sat in his truck, engine running. His old military jacket lay across the passenger seat. He didn't ask anything, just nodded as I climbed in. I buckled the seatbelt slowly. "You were right," I muttered. "He looks more like a borrower than a builder." Stellan didn't reply. He just drove. Back home. I didn't change clothes. Didn't turn on the lights. I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. The screen blinked to life, and I opened a blank email. To Cassian Dreel. Subject, "It's time." The gloves are off. Message draft. Everything we discussed. I'm done playing nice. I clicked send. Then, without ceremony, I opened my inbox and found the digital invite to the wedding. I deleted it. I clicked over to the folder labeled Last Revision Trust, and I opened it. I wasn't surprised they'd silence me. What surprised me was how confidently they thought I'd still show up. The next morning, I met Cassian at his office. Same worn wood table. Same framed photo of a younger version of himself shaking hands with a senator. The same man who once tried to destroy me in court now helping me stitch together the last threads of a life I no longer recognized. We got to work. I signed revisions to the will, added 2 more witnesses to the signature page. He'd already drafted the clause we'd discussed: any party who attempts to declare me mentally unfit forfeits all claims to inheritance, retroactive and permanent. Cassian slid a folder toward me. Also, you should see this. Inside was a screenshot from a website. A smiling headshot stared back at me. Gray temples, smug eyes. Branfield, I muttered, recognizing the name even before I read the bio. 15 years ago, Branfield had tried to steal 2 acres of riverfront from a widow whose husband had never even signed a deed. I buried him in court, made a mockery of his entire case in front of the state board. Last I heard, he'd moved to Idaho to start fresh. Now he was Kellen and Maris's counsel. Funny. The way life loops back around, only this time. I wasn't laughing. "You sure this is solid?" I asked. Cassian nodded. Official filing. Their legal counsel of record as of last Friday. So this wasn't just family squabble anymore. This was theater. And they'd hired a director with a personal grudge. By early afternoon, we had the revised documents notarized and uploaded to 4 separate drives. Cassian had already called in a second attorney to oversee any future challenges. His eyes were tired, but sharp. "You're handling this better than I expected," he said. I shrugged. "I've been handling betrayal since before he was born." On my way out, I stopped by a side street cafe for a late lunch. As I waited for my sandwich, my phone buzzed. "Rowena, I'm sorry. I didn't know about the petition. I thought it was just talk." I didn't reply, but for the first time in weeks, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, she was beginning to see through the smoke. When I got home, I made myself a cup of weak tea and headed to the den. The old family filing cabinet sat against the far wall, half covered by a faded quilt. I hadn't opened it in years. Second drawer from the top, insurance papers, old tax returns. Then tucked beneath a folder labeled 2009 Flood Adjustments, a thin manila envelope. Inside, a petition for guardianship, typed out, ready to go. My full name, my address, the name of the doctor I hadn't seen since my knee replacement 3 years ago. Blank signature lines sat like empty traps, just waiting. I sat back in the chair, the envelope still open in my hands. Of course they'd prepared it. Of course they had. Even the doctor's name had been pre-filled. Someone had done their homework. Maybe weeks ago. Maybe months. As the sun dipped behind the pine trees outside, I carried the envelope out to the porch. For a moment, I considered lighting a match, just letting it burn. Instead, I slipped it into the fireproof folder I'd once used for Marjorie's hospice documents. Proof always matters more than pride, I whispered. I'd learned that lesson too late once. I wouldn't forget it again. Just before midnight, another email arrived, formal. From the wedding's digital coordinator, Mr. Dolen, you are still warmly invited to the rehearsal dinner. However, per the couple's request, we will not be including additional remarks from family. They'd cut my speech, again. But this time, they used a font with flowers. Elgin's voice had barely faded in my ear. If it comes with your blessing, I'll sign today when I stepped out of my car at Willow Creek. The sun was already dipping behind the trees, casting long shadows across the stone path to the rehearsal venue. I wore the same navy jacket I'd worn to Marjorie's retirement party. I carried a leather folio under my arm. No one expected me to show. I walked past valet boys and floral centerpieces without pause. Rowena appeared near the entrance, her eyes wide with something close to pleading. Dad? I didn't stop. I nodded to her gently, but kept walking. She reached out to touch my arm but let it fall. Inside, everything was lit gold, fake elegance, the kind you rent by the hour. Kellen and Maris stood at the front near a projector screen. Their smiles stiffened when they saw me. Merrick, Kellen said, voice too light. Glad you could make it. Wouldn't miss it, I replied. The folio stayed tight under my arm. Guests milled around sipping white wine, complimenting centerpieces. Maris's mother waved at me like we were old friends. I gave her nothing back. The lights dimmed. Someone tapped a glass for silence. A young man in a beige vest wedding coordinator probably cleared his throat. Before we continue with logistics, the couple would like to share something special. The screen flared to life. A home for the future. The title card read in cursive script. Soft piano music played. Then came the images. Digital renderings of my house. My damn house filled the screen. Walls knocked down. Kitchen gutted. My library turned into a yoga loft. The oak paneling sanded over, replaced with something white and glossy. The crowd murmured with delight. Maris leaned into Kellen's shoulder. Imagine the light, she whispered. Someone clapped. They were applauding a theft. I waited until the last frame faded, until the last guest had finished their sigh, then walked to the front. Someone tried to introduce me. I held up my hand. I won't take long. The mic felt colder than I expected. That house, I said evenly, was built by my hands, brick by brick, for a woman named Marjorie, not for profit, not for speculation, not as some showroom for minimalism. A ripple through the crowd. Chairs shifted, glasses paused mid-air. And while you were all watching that fantasy, I continued. None of you stopped to ask who owns it. I opened the folio. I do. And then I pressed play on the recording I'd hidden on a flash drive one Cassian had helped me isolate, clean, and timestamp. Kellen's voice came first. If we get him declared unfit before Sunday, the title clears automatically. Maris. He'll be too confused by then. Just let him sit in the audience, nod like he understands. Static. Then laughter. Hers? The room froze. No one clapped now. Kellen stood, pale. That's Dad. That's taken out of context. I didn't look at him. Let me introduce someone. I said instead, Cassian Dreel, my attorney. Many of you remember him from your HOA lawsuits. Laughter tight, uncomfortable. Cassian stood near the back, hands folded calmly. I can confirm legal action has already begun. The will has been amended. Any attempts at guardianship or coerced transfer are grounds for immediate forfeiture under Idaho Code 15-2803. Maris tried to speak, but her voice cracked. Kellen sank back into his chair, Cassian added. And should additional attempts be made, We are fully prepared to pursue criminal charges for fraud. No one touched their wine now. I closed the folio, looked at Delaney. She didn't smile, but she met my eyes. That was enough. I set the mic down gently, and I walked out. Outside, the evening air was crisp. Someone behind me whispered, low but clear, "That man just burned down a wedding with the truth." I reached my car, sat for a minute, then dialed the number I knew by heart. "Elgin," I said. "If it comes with your blessing," he replied, "I'll sign today." I didn't sleep the night after the rehearsal dinner. I just sat by the front window, watching the horizon for something that wasn't guilt or grief, but nothing rose. Not light, not peace, just the quiet ticking of a house trying to catch its breath after a storm. No calls came that morning. Not from Kellen, not from Rowena, not even from Delaney. It was the kind of silence that follows an explosion where even the air feels bruised. By noon, I logged into a website I hadn't touched since Marjorie passed. It belonged to a small, independent realtor. I bypassed the big agencies. No logos, no banners, just plain text and upload boxes. I posted a listing, no photos, no poetic fluff, built by hand, one owner, serious buyers only. I set the price well below market value, not low enough to scream desperation, but firm enough to say, this isn't about money. I hit submit and shut the laptop. That was it. The next afternoon, Elgin Trask pulled up in an old blue pickup, dust on the fenders, dog hair in the passenger seat. I watched from the porch as he stepped out and stretched his back. He had his father's posture upright but never stiff. Stellan must have told him. We didn't shake hands right away. He brought coffee, same brand I used to keep in the garage fridge. We sat at the kitchen table like two men who didn't need to fill silence. After a while, I stood. "Come on," I said. "Let me show you the place." We walked room to room. He didn't ask questions, just looked. Ran his hand along the banister. Noticed the tiny dip in the floor where Marjorie's rocker used to sit. In the hallway closet, I showed him the pencil marks. Kellen, age 7. I said, "Tried to stand on tiptoe, once got caught." Elgin chuckled, soft and respectful. "You kept them all. Some things shouldn't be painted over." We ended up in the backyard. The garden had gone wild since spring, but her old spade still hung from the peg in the shed. Elgin looked around like someone entering a chapel. When we came back inside, I didn't sit. "I'm not looking for a bidding war." I said, "I'm not staging this place with fake plants or citrus candles. I just want someone to live here who understands it was never meant to be flipped or flattened. It should matter." He nodded once. "I've got the cash." He offered his hand. I took it. We didn't hug, but something passed between us anyway. That evening, as the sky dimmed, I walked the house one last time. My steps were slow but not reluctant. Every room held something. The spot where Marjorie used to fold laundry. The nook where I'd once hidden a model train from Kellen. The crack in the guest room ceiling shaped like Idaho. I left a note in the drawer beneath the hallway mirror. Folded, taped shut. This house stood for something. Please let it keep standing for that. The keys I left on the kitchen counter. That night, while washing my last coffee cup, the phone rang. Kellen. I let it ring. Then I typed a message and hit send. "It's done. Don't ask for what you wouldn't build." I turned off the porch light. For the last time, the deed would be signed in the morning. I didn't wave. Neither did she. But maybe. That was enough for now. The morning after the sale, I woke to quiet, not the suffocating kind, but the kind that lets you breathe. The house felt different, not hollow, not empty, just waiting. I moved through each room, hand resting on surfaces I hadn't noticed in years, the groove in the windowsill where Marjorie used to rest her teacup, the notch in the banister from where Kellen bumped a toy truck down the stairs. The echo was still there, but it wasn't memory anymore. It was physical. Drywall and space. I spent the next hour labeling drawers, boxing up the last of my keepsakes. I left behind the tools, the rickety stool, the worn broom with the duct-taped handle. Those belonged to the house now. I sent a short message to Kellen and Rowena that afternoon, asked if they'd come by for one final moment, just to speak, nothing more. Nothing came back, not even the little typing dots. Around 4, the screen door creaked. I thought it was wind, but it was Delaney. She didn't say hello, just walked in, sat on the porch swing, and waited. I brought out 2 glasses of iced tea. We sat in silence. After a while, she said, "I think they're embarrassed. Or maybe angry. Or maybe both." I nodded. She looked out toward the lake. "I don't know what they expected, but I know you built this house, and you never once used it like a weapon. You never tried to make it conditional." I reached into my shirt pocket and handed her a folded paper. She opened it slowly, scanning the page. Her name sat at the bottom, not as heir, not as owner, but as witness. I wanted someone there who understood what it meant. I said, she didn't speak, just held the paper with both hands, like it might tear if she blinked too hard. We didn't hug. That wasn't our style. But before she left, she touched the door frame and whispered, "It still smells like her, like soap and cinnamon." The next morning, I walked to the cafe. Habit, mostly. The place had a new barista, a tall kid with too much energy and not enough beard for the attitude he was trying to sell. He looked up from the register and said, "You look like the security guy at that wedding last weekend." I smiled. I used to guard a lot more than buildings. He blinked, then laughed politely, not understanding. I took my coffee to the far table, the one by the window. 2 older regulars were seated nearby. They glanced over, then one leaned closer. "I saw the video," he said. "You didn't just defend yourself. You defended the idea of legacy." I didn't correct him. Let the myth grow. This time, I'd earned it. Later that day, I returned home, or what was left of it, for me. The truck was packed, the floors swept, nothing left on the counters. But I still had one thing to leave behind. In the smallest drawer of the hallway console, I taped an envelope, inside, a handwritten note. "If you read this, know the home is no longer mine, but the values inside these walls still are. Take care of them." I sealed it, pressed it flat, and shut the drawer. I stepped outside as the sun dipped low. Orange light spilled across the gravel. As I approached the truck, I saw it a dark sedan parked a few houses down, just idling. Rowena. She didn't wave. Neither did I. But maybe that was enough for now. I left the door unlocked, just once, in case memory decided to come in, instead of just haunt. A week had passed since I gave up the lake house. My new apartment sat tucked above a hardware store near Spokane, clean, square, quiet. Everything worked. Nothing breathed. I spent the first few days unpacking things I used to swear were important. A few books, a worn armchair, Marjorie's teacup set with only 3 cups still intact. There was no view, no scent of pine off the lake. The light didn't change with the hour, it just sat there, indifferent, like the walls. The silence here wasn't peaceful, it was clinical. A hum of refrigerator coils and occasional hallway footsteps, but it kept me company. Each morning, I'd look at my phone, the screen always blank. No missed calls, no voicemails, Kellen hadn't reached out, not even with a bitter retort. Maybe silence was his victory. Delaney had texted once, short but sincere. "I hope your new place feels like peace." I hadn't answered. I wanted to, but I didn't know how to describe peace that only came in pieces. One morning, just after dawn, I heard the soft click of paper brushing tile. By the door, a plain white envelope. No return address. I opened it with the wariness of a man who's been delivered too many legal threats. But inside was nothing hostile, just a photograph. It had once hung near the fireplace at the lake house, before it was quietly removed. Me, Marjorie, and a 5-year-old Kellen, all in denim, all smiling too wide. Her garden in the background, tools still leaning against the fence, my arm around both of them. On the back were the faint marks of peeled tape 4 corners. Where it had once been fixed to wood, there was no note. I placed it on the counter and stared at it through breakfast. Some hours later, I still hadn't touched it again, just kept glancing at it like a wound that had scarred over without permission. That afternoon, Cassian knocked. I didn't ask how he knew I was home. Final confirmations. He said, "You're clear. Title transferred. Funds posted. All done." He handed me a slim folder and looked around the small space. Cozy. I poured him some lukewarm coffee. He drank it without complaint. "The threats are gone," he added. I nodded. That was never the threat. Cass. The forgetting was. He didn't reply, just gave me a long, measured look, then stood to go. "Still," he said at the door, "for what it's worth, you did good. You chose clean over comfortable. That's not nothing." I spent that evening with Stellan. His place was cluttered and honest, like the man himself. We had roast beef and overcooked carrots, followed by a glass of whiskey that tasted like firewood. He leaned back in his chair, holding the glass by the rim. "Would you do it again?" "Merrick? All of it?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I said, "but maybe I'd speak less with anger, more with memory." He nodded slowly. "That's a hard balance. It always is. Back home." I opened a drawer beside the bed, took the photo from the kitchen counter and laid it gently next to a folded letter Marjorie had once written to Delaney, never mailed. Her voice in ink, her hope in lines. I created a new folder. To Delaney. One day. Inside. I placed both the photo and the letter, sealed the folder, labeled it in pencil. I left it there. As dusk bled across the city skyline, I sat by the window. The noise here was different sirens instead of loons, headlights instead of fireflies. Down on the street, a car idled, headlights off, parked half a block away. I recognized the shape of her hair even through the windshield. Rowena didn't get out. I didn't move. Somewhere between hurt and habit, we both just sat. Maybe that was enough. For now, I hadn't expected to wake with calm. But there it was, quiet, unmoving, like the surface of water when nothing presses against it. The sun had just started to warm the sill when I sat down with my coffee and the morning paper. I didn't bother to read beyond the headlines. Most of it was noise. But the window was open, and through it came a breeze that smelled faintly of last night's rain and someone nearby baking cinnamon rolls. No one knocked. For once. I wasn't waiting for anyone to. The mail came late. Tucked between a coupon booklet and an electric bill was a cream-colored envelope with handwriting I'd recognize even if I went blind. Delaney. I opened it slowly, afraid I'd ruin whatever it held. "Dear Grandpa," it began. I didn't know how much a house could mean until I saw someone give it away without flinching. You didn't just protect a home. You defended an idea of love I hadn't seen before, not in words, not in sermons, but in choices. You didn't owe anyone anything, and you still gave something they couldn't return. I'm proud of you. I hope this letter finds you somewhere peaceful, even if peace isn't a place. I folded the letter carefully and set it beside my cup. That night, I opened the storage box I hadn't touched in years. VHS tapes, some labeled in Marjorie's handwriting, Kellen's 3rd birthday, camping, fall, Thanksgiving 1991. I pulled out the old VCR, the one with a bent eject button, and started watching. Marjorie in the kitchen, laughing as she burned potatoes again. Kellen playing with a box more than the toy inside. Me, holding up a fish that was probably too small to brag about. The years blurred together like a slideshow with no narration, just color, movement, and sound. I stayed up past midnight, editing clips into one file. I titled it Before We Forgot. I transferred it to a flash drive, labeled it in red marker, then printed a note, "Memories don't expire when people do. Take care of them." I mailed it the next morning to Delaney's campus address. A few days later, an email came through. From Kellen. Subject none. Message: "We heard the house transferred. I guess that's it. No dear dad. No signature. Just those 5 words." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Cassian visited again that week. He brought lunch sandwiches from a place we both hated but ordered from anyway. "You came out of this cleaner than most," he said. "Most men your age fold or forgive too early." I chewed slowly, wiped my hands. I didn't want revenge, I said. I wanted clarity. "Sometimes the truth is enough." He nodded. "You're a stubborn old man. Takes one to recognize one." That evening, I sat on the narrow balcony with a cup of tea. There wasn't much to see, just rooftops, a few trees holding on to what was left of spring. But in my mind, I was back at the lake. Marjorie's voice came to me, not as sound but as memory. "You finished the home. Merrick. Now, let the rest go." I closed my eyes and let that sit in the silence. Let it settle into my chest like warmth that didn't need a fire to exist. Later, at my desk, I closed the laptop. The screen went dark, and for a moment, I could see only my own reflection older, still here. Not what was taken, but what stayed.